There's no better time than the present. I spent so long and so hard working on this. I'm giving it to the world. I'm putting it on YouTube, so whatever happens, it's there for eternity. This is continuing with Chapter 5, Coke Addiction, Pill Poppers, and Police Officers. This is Part 3 of Chapter 5. When we woke up the next morning, the homeless Kenny was gone, and everyone checked to make sure nothing was missing. I rolled a morning joint while Kenny whipped up a breakfast pie. The ambitious pizza place owner got me working right away. Before noon, we drove to a set of expensive hotels with a stack of flyers. Expensive hotels are a no-no for pizza flyer delivery. The security guards know all about flyer people, and if a tough one grabs you, there's a good chance he'll rough you up. I need someone they haven't seen before, Kenny said. Will I get in trouble? I asked. Not if you apologize, play dumb, and promise to leave, he told me. Why don't you do that? I already got my warning, he said. The flyers looked professional, and since the people staying in the hotels were from out of town, they had no idea how ghetto Kenny's pizza place actually was. The larger pizza companies have an agreement with the hotel chains where they can put flyers inside the hotel rooms, but Kenny barely made enough dough to keep the lights on. I lived at their pizza place for about a month, dodging security guards in hallways while I put flyers on hotels' doors during the day, and I avoided cops on the road while I delivered pizzas and weed at night. Their pizza joint was right by Thousand Oaks Public Library, so I'd go there whenever I wanted to get away or do some reading. I made decent money, but it was all under the table and risky as hell. I didn't even have a driver's license, so most of the time I was driving like a nervous wreck trying to deliver someone a shitty pizza. I liked helping with their weed business, and it was fun running into the stoners I grew up with and hadn't seen in years. Kenny and Betty mainly sold weed, but occasionally she'd have me deliver sealed envelopes to shady figures during my late night pizza runs. After a month, they finally found a set of apartments that take them, so I couldn't sleep on their pizza parlor floor anymore. I had to find somewhere to go at night, so I got a gig working the graveyard shift at a Kmart that was closing down. It was the same store Michael and I used to walk to as kids, near the library. The new Walmart had put them out of business and they needed a bunch of temps to help them clear the shelves. Working at Kmart brought back memories, and I spent most of the early morning hours reminiscing about being a kid. I was 23 but felt older in some ways and younger in others. I thought about aging the whole shift. I'm sure not having enough sleep had something to do with it, but I'd spend an hour every night in the Kmart bathroom analyzing my skull, trying to see if my hairline was receding or my forehead was getting bigger. I felt like my chance of going to college and being a writer was fading. I didn't know much about college, but I knew most students were younger than I was. I imagined none of them had to work the graveyard shift at Kmart just to have somewhere to go at night. For a couple months, I delivered pizzas at Kenny's Pizza Place and worked at Kmart at night. Benny would sometimes come and visit me when I got off early in the morning, and a couple times he snuck me into the apartment he was staying at near Churchill High School. On Easter morning that year, Benny picked me up, and when I got off of work at Kmart, we drove around smoking weed and blasting music until the sun came up, and then went back to his apartment. I didn't know his roommates, and it was basically their place, so he said I could stay for a little bit, but then I'd have to leave. I insisted he give me a ride to my mom's house or my van at the Kmart, but he was tired. We got into an argument, and I left and didn't see him for a while. I walked from Benny's apartment to Mom's backyard, about 10 miles. I cursed at all the cars driving by, the sky, and even blades of grass under my feet. When I came to an intersection, I saw a bum flying a sign and noticed an elderly woman about to hand him a $10 bill. I yelled out, "Don't give it to him!" and ruined their moment. They both looked at me with disgust. I regretted saying it the second it came out. When I had a day off, I'd go to the library and talk to the librarian. She told me it took a few months for the government to get back to someone about financial aid for college. Be patient, she said. This was in the internet early days, and I hadn't ever even owned a computer before, so the librarian was kind enough to show me how to set up an email address and look up information about Alta Vista. One of the first things I did was look up the life expectancy of a homeless person, and according to the National Coalition for the Healthcare and Homelessness, the life expectancy for homeless is 42 to 52 years, compared to 78 for non-homeless. After Easter, it got way too hot to sleep in my un-air-conditioned van, so I was really happy to get an offer to stay at a customer of Betty's house named Stuart. Stu was a pathological liar with scat for brains, but he said I could live in his house and have my own room. Supposedly, he lived a few miles from the pizza place with his common law wife. I figured a guy like Stu lived in a dilapidated shack on a farm, but it turned out his place was right down the street from where Michael and I grew up. Stu's wife claimed to be a wicked witch, but she was really just a delusional drug addict. Their house was nicely decorated and as clean as tidy as the lady's OCD could get it. It was owned by her elderly parents, but they'd moved to a retirement community a year earlier. The woman and Stu hadn't been together long. They met at a bar, and Stu was using her for her parents' car, house, and money. She had an 8-year-old daughter who she hadn't seen in a year. The court didn't give her custody because of her obvious mental condition and drug habit. My room was intended to be for her little girl, with posters of unicorns and teen idols on the walls. There was a tiny princess bed that I could fit in. Half my legs hung over the edge that I couldn't fit in, and half my legs hung over the edge. So I usually slept on the floor in front of the TV. I hadn't had it so good in years. I had my own carpeted room that had a TV, HBO, and most importantly, it was indoors. Stu wore a neck brace and told me he'd recently been in a few car accidents due to his addiction to pain meds. It was a little hard to fall asleep after he told me that. His wife was addicted to all kinds of crap too. In my experience, pill poppers are the most dangerous kind of druggies. I'd take a crackhead over a pill popper any day of the week. When I wanted to get away from the freaks, I'd take long walks around the suburb I grew up in. The kids I knew back in the day had long moved away, but I'd still walk in the same way, through the woods we cut through to school and down to the ditch where I first smoked pot. A week after I moved in, Stu bought his wife a puppy. These people were anything but suitable pet owners, and I wouldn't have trusted them with a goldfish. The dog preferred to be by my side and was frightened by the pill poppers. He was a white pit bull with a black patch under one eye. They named him Rex and told me not to be too nice to him. I want him to be mean and productive, Stu said. I spent hours with the pooch, teaching him how to sit, to give five, and speak. Ruff, ruff. I showed Stu and his wannabe pagan wife, and they were about as impressed as a pair of lowly drug addicts could be. I stopped driving my van after I moved in with him and told Kenny and Betty I needed a break from pizza delivery. After that, I kept my van parked in front of Stu's house. I imagined the rusty beast was an eyesore for the wealthy neighbors, but I had enough problems and didn't want to deal with getting pulled over without a driver's license and a bunch of unpaid tickets. I stayed at their upper middle class house for about a month. I tried to clean up after myself and stay out of their way. I knew it wasn't going to last and I could only avoid them for so long, and because they were so crazy. One morning, I woke up to the crazy witch woman screaming at Stu in another room. I heard glass break, and when I opened my door, I was blinded by her half-naked body and frizzy hair. Her makeup was smeared under her eyes, tribal style, and she was throwing expensive china against the brick fireplace. She took one look at me and said, "You, Simsalabam." "Yeah, I have some errands I need to take care of," I responded. I got in my van and decided to head to Mom's house. It was a few days before her birthday, and I figured I'd stop and grab her some of her favorite yellow flowers. I needed her out of the house, but it was a risk driving anywhere. I figured I might as well go to see my mother. It was risky. Mom's house was surrounded by all the jurisdictions where I was most wanted. If I got pulled over, I'd surely be arrested. My van would be impounded, and I'd be thrown in jail. I'd driven the route 100 times before, but never that nervous. I was sweating profusely, while I frequently looked in my mirrors every few seconds for any sign of a squad car. In other words, I was asking for it. 2 minutes from Mom's house, a cop got behind me and tried to give me a heart attack. My plates were clean because I never transferred the title from the guy I bought the van from. I was the one with the unpaid traffic tickets, not my van. So as long as the cop didn't pull me over, I knew I'd be okay. However, I kept eyeballing him through my rearview mirror, and in Texas, this constitutes as suspicious behavior. The cop flashed his lights and flicked his sirens. I turned on my emergency lights, pulled over, rolled down my window, and waited. 5 minutes later, a gray-haired, four-eyed, duck-waddling, live-oak police officer came to the side of my van. I initiated the conversation, nervously. How's it going?" I asked the cop. "Why are you nervous?" was the first thing he said to me. Cops make me nervous, isn't that normal?" "You shouldn't be nervous if you ain't got nothing to hide." He asked for my license and insurance. I told him I didn't have insurance and handed him a worn-down driver's license that expired 3 years earlier. I had over a dozen warrants attached to it. He said he'd be right back, and I prayed. I asked God to break his computer or give him a 187 that he'd have to run off to A bolt of lightning coming out of this cloudless sky and knocking on his ass would have been nice, but I knew the only way was if the cops decided to ignore my warrants, my big bag of weed, and my lack of a driver's license and insurance based on the sole fact that he thought I was cool. 5 minutes later, he came back to the driver's side window with a stunned look on his face. "What the hell are you doing?" he asked. "What do you mean?" "You have unpaid tickets, you reek like unburnt marijuana, and your driver's license expired 3 years ago," he barked. I looked down at my steering wheel and said, "I got issues." "Are you getting smart with me?" he asked. "No, sir," I quickly replied. "I hardly ever drive, but it's my mom's birthday." "You couldn't take a bus?" he asked. "The bus don't run on Sunday," I told him. For whatever reason, during this whole ordeal, the officer was rather congenial. I stepped out of the car and gave him my pipe and bag of pot. "I'll keep your reefer, won't charge you with that," he said. "But I have to at least take you in for the warrants in my jurisdiction." "I'll talk to the sergeant when we get there," he said. "Maybe we can get things taken care of here and won't have to take you to downtown SA." I was handcuffed and driven to the Live Oak Police substation. It was a slow crime day and the cops were watching the 2002 FIFA World Cup. They were all chatty, bored with soccer. 2002, that was Italy won that year. Wanting to know the young white guy's story. Instead of telling them I was a homeless loser, I told them I was a full-time college student at UT, just in San Antonio for the weekend visiting my mother on her birthday. "My uncle went to UT," one of them said. "What's your major?" "Print journalism." They started warming up to me, so I kept up with the charade, and before you knew it, I had told them I was the editor of the largest circulated college newspaper in the United States, the Daily Texan. It could be true, I said to myself. Someday it may be true. 20 minutes later, they took the cuffs off and let me go outside to smoke a cigarette. I felt like Jack Nicholson's character in Easy Rider, a good old local boy that just ran into a bit of trouble. After my smoke, they told me that if I paid at least one warrant from their district, then they'd let me go. I didn't have any money, so I called Mom and begged for her help. She cried like she did when she visited me in county jail. She had wiped off her tears by the time she got to the station and was handling it pretty well until she found out that I told the cops I was a full-time student at UT. This was her breaking point. She called me a liar and sobbed her eyes out in the middle of the police station. "You don't go to the University of Texas," she asserted. "Neither of you boys even finished high school." I looked up at the cops and their disappointed faces. I let them down by not being the person I claimed to be. They couldn't even look at me. I pride myself on being honest. Sometimes it's all I got. So this whole lying and making things up made me feel sick and not myself. The cops let me leave with Mom, but they kept my van and wouldn't let me get my things out. Mom dropped me off at a gas station. I wasn't even welcome in her backyard anymore. She had to pay over $350 and Guy was going to take it out of her allowance and lunch money. I felt horrible, so instead of taking the bus to Stu's house, I sat in a ditch across the street from Mom's all night. I was glad I wasn't in jail, but the Live Oak police had my van and everything I owned. I figured I'd go down there, fill out some paperwork, and they'd eventually give it back. I didn't think they could just keep my things. But the next day, when I called them, they said since I hadn't registered the van in my name, the only person who could get it out was the person who the vehicle was still registered to. I either had to come up with a title or notarize a letter from the person I bought the van from. Michael and I spent the next day searching for the guy who sold us the van, but we were only able to track down his wife. She said the dude was out on a drinking binge and she hadn't seen him in weeks. Even if we would have found him, we still would have had to convince the ex-police officer alcoholic to take time out of his drinking schedule to come see a notary at the Live Oak Police Department with some kid he met once. That night, I took the last bus to Stu's house. I hadn't been there in a couple of days, and it felt like something was up. Stu and his wife were waiting for me in the living room when I got there. The puppy was locked outside, scratching at the back door, begging to greet me. Stu's wife had a boiling look on her face and wouldn't look in my direction. "What's wrong?" I asked. Stuart's wife jumped off the couch and crazily scribbled on a notepad. Stuart, who could barely read, tried to interpret. He said his wife knew I'd been casting my own spells and mixing her potions. What can I say? I was speechless. I didn't reply and headed straight to my room. I headed straight to my room. But Stu jumped off the couch, got in my face, and started shoving me around like a schoolyard bully. He got in a fighting stance with his fists clenched, trying to look tough. I could have knocked him out with one punch. I knew I wasn't ever going back to that room again, but I still wanted to maintain some kind of peace, only because I'd taken the last bus to get there and couldn't think of anywhere else to go at such short notice. "Look, I know you guys are upset," I said, "and I apologize if I've done anything wrong to upset either of you in any way." "Leave," Stu interrupted. "We want you out of here now." "I'm not leaving," I asserted. "At least not now, tonight, this second. I took the last bus to get here," I said. I'm going to sleep in the backyard and leave first thing in the morning. I didn't say it like a question, and they didn't object, so I went in their backyard, greeted by an exuberant puppy. I went to the corner of the yard and curled up in a hammock with the dog. It was a sad night. Both me and the pooch knew we'd never see each other again. Wasn't gonna be there to watch him grow up, and he was most likely gonna be subjected to years of abuse. The poor thing might spend his life on a short chain in a barren yard, but deep down he knew there were kind people like me out in the world. The next morning, I left Stu's and walked around the neighborhood I grew up in. After 20 minutes, I found myself on the same route Michael and I used to walk to middle school on when we were kids. It wasn't hard to remember what it felt like to be 13. It was the same time of morning we used to walk to school, and I had some of the same sidewalks and driveways I saw back then. Some houses still have the same decorations and dorm mats from years before. Part of me wanted to relive the last decade. I didn't feel like I had much besides a handful of experiences, ignorant to the knowledge I gained. I found a familiar tree to sit under and took a few deep breaths. Then I went over life's recent setbacks. I got kicked out of where I was living. I made my mother cry at a police station. I lost the notebooks, pictures, and journals I've been collecting for years. And my van was confiscated by the Live Oak Police Department. That was chapter 5 from the book Gonzo Education, written by me, Gregory Brandt. I'm going to read the whole book. I will not be denied. There's like some ghetto drug dealer that hates reading. My voice is, if you notice, if you watch the video, it carries, and it's a very strong voice. And that guy over there who can't even read and just sort of rips people off, he hates reading and people that read. And so he just yells and throws things up here. It's just like crazy. It upsets him so much. But, hey, just shake them haters off. And that's what this book is about, just persevering no matter all obstacles. I ask you to click the thumbs up, and more importantly, go to the Amazon, click a review, say you saw this on YouTube, say it really moved you, and tell one person about this, tell that person, and tell one person. And thank you for your help. I appreciate it. Have a nice day.